Hey guys, I hope this video finds you well. I'm sure you heard, but this last Thursday, the governor of North Carolina made a pretty big announcement about schools and learning. He announced that for the rest of the semester, the rest of the year, all learning is going to take place online. And while he did outline a plan for how things are going to return to normal, I'm sure your first thought was of your friends. You thought of your teammates on your baseball team. You thought of the friends you sit with at lunch. You thought of that class, or maybe you thought of band. But you thought of your friends and the time that you're going to miss with them. And you thought to yourself, man, I'm going to miss those guys. I wish we could go back to school. Perhaps there was even disappointment or genuine sadness. My thoughts go out to you, and I want you to know that those feelings are not only natural, but I actually think they're God-given. We as humans were made to interact with each other. We were made to be in community. In Genesis chapters 2 and 3, God looked down on Adam when he was all by himself and said, "It's not good for man to be alone." And so he made Eve. Humans were made to be with other humans. And so as you look forward to the rest of the year, and perhaps you even look back on the last month, it's okay to really miss friendships, to miss community. I've been keeping my eyes and ears open, and recently I've heard this sentiment. I've heard, thank God for coronavirus. Thank God for this quarantine, because it's brought us closer together. I think it's a lie. I think that is a terrible lie. I'm thankful for things like this video, for the Zoom we're doing tomorrow at 7. Please join us. But those are just placeholders. They don't replace person-to-person interaction. At best, those things maintain relationships. They don't build relationships. We as humans were meant to interact on a personal, deep level, physically with each other, right? To be next to each other, and the internet just doesn't cut it. I miss you guys, and I hope you miss youth as well. And so as we look forward to things returning to normal, I thought it would be good for us to do a series, a biblical community series, so that when we returned, probably near the end of May, we would have an idea of what we as a community need to look like, and how we can better participate in that community, and how we can better appreciate it. It's going to be 4 weeks, just like the governor's plan. It's going to be look behind, love within, reflect above, and reach out. Obviously, these are 3 simplified little pithy statements that I'll expand on each week. But I'm looking forward to going over these with you. Today, we are going to do look behind. We're going to do look behind. And what I mean by that is really simple. It's to look to Jesus. Jesus gave us an example to follow. God calls us to be in community, and he didn't just put that need within us and then leave us hanging out to dry. He didn't say, hey, go figure it out on your own. He gave us an example to follow. And Jesus is that example. And he's that example to us in 3 different ways. 3 different ways I want to explain how he is a thing for us to copy. He's a thing for us to look to for advice. And the first is that he's a part of the Trinity. He's a part of the Trinity. Now, this word may be intimidating for you. You may not even know what it means. Trinity is a word we use to describe God, specifically the fact that God is 3 people, 3, in one. We have God the Father, the God that created everything. We have Jesus the Son, that's Jesus that came and died on the cross. And we have the Holy Spirit. Together, these are 3 persons, and yet there is only one God. In Deuteronomy 6, verse 4, He says this, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one." We know God is only one. We only worship one God, and yet it's comprised of three persons. That may not make sense to us. That may be confusing, and I even think that that's okay. We can maybe talk about that at a different time. But I think the thing that's important for us to understand is that that's a way that God is an example to us. We are meant to be in community, and that's so important to us, and God wanted us to understand that so much that He Himself works as a community. God wanted us to be a part of community, so in order to encourage us, to give us something to aspire towards, He Himself works as a community. That's right. It's such a big deal that we as humans are supposed to interact with other humans, that God made it a key part of who He was. He operates amongst three other persons because He wants us to know that we need to do the same. God operates as a community, so we need to operate as a community. God doesn't do things alone, so we shouldn't do things alone. Right? That's the first way God, or Jesus rather, is an example for us to follow, so we can learn from Him being a part of the Trinity. But the second thing that we can learn is that He actually had a community here on earth. You probably know from the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that Jesus went around teaching, right? He went around teaching, and of course He had His famous 12 disciples, one of which betrayed Him. Right? But probably what you didn't know is that really Jesus kind of had three different levels. First, He had His 12 disciples. Those were guys that He knew deeply. He poured into very, very intimately. But there were other people He trusted as well, his second level. He had other followers, probably in the hundreds, people who really were following His teachings. He didn't know them as well as, say, His 12 disciples, and that's okay. Those were people He trusted. They followed Him. They were His second level. And then He had the crowds. He had the people that followed Him around, and the crowds ranged in the thousands at times. Jesus' community comprised of three levels. The same should be true for us. You should have that inner group, the inner group of friends, the people you trust who know you really well, that know your deep, dark things. And then you should have the church. You should have people that also know you, but that don't know you as well. You trust them, yes, but you're not super close, but you still are close, right? That's your second level. And then you have everyone else, people that perhaps you're friends with, but you don't know real well at all, and your trust is only there, or everyone else. Community is comprised of many levels. Another thing we learned from Jesus' community was that it was made up of a diverse group of people. Jesus had fishermen, He had Pharisees, the really educated lawyer guys. He had women, He had men. Men helped Him as He taught. Women even helped fund His projects sometimes. It was a large group of people, and He gave them teachings on how to operate as a community, as a group. And then last but not least, right, we have Jesus was the Trinity, and that's a way we can follow His example as a community. We see His community on earth, and that's a thing for us to follow. But then the last is that there was a church. There was a church that came after He left, right? In Acts chapter 2, we hear the story of Jesus ascending to heaven, and He leaves the disciples with this task, the task to pass things on. And the entire book of Acts is just a record of how that happened. It's a record of the problems they encountered, the successes they had, the way they structured things, the way they interacted with each other. And then you have Paul. Paul's letters even give us a hint in how the early church interacted. And that's an example that Jesus has given us. Jesus has given us to follow. I bring up these three things, the Trinity, Jesus' community, and the early church, to tell us that, look, just being part of a church that kind of haphazardly goes through things is not enough. We as a youth group don't need to just show up and let that be it. There's more to it than being part of a biblical community, right? There's more to it than just games and a lesson, right? Being a part of a biblical community is something deeper. It's something more important. There's more elements to it. And Jesus gives us lots of sources of information on how to learn how to do those things. And we need to look into those. We need to read those. And it's important that we do that because, as I mentioned, it's so important to who we are. I feel it. I'm sure you feel it. This quarantine has left me wanting community, wanting deeper connections more now than ever. And it's my hope that through this series, we would look at Jesus, we look at the things he left us, and that we would seek to have a better, more biblical community that can better benefit us and that can bring us closer to each other, but also closer to God. I hope you guys have a fantastic week. Stay tuned next week as we we go to our second week of biblical community. We are specifically going to talk about how we should love within, how we should love each other. So until next time, Jonathan is out. Make sure you join us for our Zoom meeting tomorrow at 7. The link I sent out to the parents, and also it's on Instagram. So until next week, see you guys.